Daisy was determined to have the last word. She wanted to win, to make her point stick, never stopping to consider the weight of what she was about to say. Then it slipped out. "You argue too much for a man. No wonder you're so small down there." The instant the words left her mouth, the atmosphere shifted. The tension that had been building all evening didn't erupt. It collapsed into a crushing silence. Raymond didn't snap back. He didn't insult her in return. He didn't even raise his voice. He simply stood there frozen. His jaw tightened, his fists curled slightly, and his eyes darkened with something far deeper than anger, hurt, humiliation. An old wound she had just torn wide open without realizing it. Without a word, he turned and walked away. Daisy stayed still, waiting for the inevitable, for him to come back, to shout, to argue, to throw her own words back at her like he always did. But this time, nothing. His silence, that unbearable stillness, was worse than anything he could have said. Most couples fight, raise voices, slam doors, someone storming out, but sooner or later they circle back to each other. That had always been the pattern for Daisy and Raymond. Their marriage wasn't perfect, but even their arguments had a rhythm. The clash, the push and pull, the eventual reconciliation. But this time was different. That night, Raymond never returned to their bed. At first, Daisy told herself he was just cooling off. Maybe he'd slip in later while she slept. Maybe by morning, everything would feel normal again. But when she reached across the sheets the next day, his side was still untouched. Unease coiled in her chest. This wasn't like him. No matter how bad the fights had been before, he had always been there, even if only physically. She got up, searching the house, expecting to find him in the kitchen or sunk into the couch. Instead, she found him in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed, distant and unresponsive. He wasn't sulking. He wasn't fuming. He wasn't doing anything at all. He was simply empty. Daisy hovered in the doorway, waiting for him to say something, but the silence stretched. She spoke first. "Raymond." "Nothing. Why are you sleeping in here?" Still nothing. She pressed further. Was he still upset? Was he coming back to bed? He barely glanced at her. And when he finally spoke, it wasn't anger. It wasn't a plea for her to understand. It was just quiet. A silence so heavy it said more than words ever could. Days passed. Nothing changed. At first, Daisy clung to the idea that he just needed time, that he'd get over it, that they'd slip back into the life they had. But it didn't happen. Raymond pulled away completely. If she walked into a room, he left. If she tried to start a conversation, he barely acknowledged her. If she reached for him, he pulled back. This wasn't simple anger. It was something deeper, something final. It was as though he had erased her from his life without speaking a single word. Desperate, Daisy tried everything she could think of. She cooked his favorite meals, hoping the familiar comfort would soften him, but he hardly touched his plate. She left little notes, tried small act of apology without saying the words outright. Nothing reached him. For the first time, Daisy understood this wasn't another fight. Something was breaking, and she didn't know how to mend it. She tried to make him laugh, but he stayed stone-faced. She brushed her fingers against his as they passed in the hallway, but he stiffened and pulled away. Every attempt failed. That's when she realized something chilling. For years, she believed that fighting meant there was still something to fight for, that as long as they shouted, they still cared. But now, the silence between them was heavier than any shouting match. It wasn't tension, it was emptiness. And that emptiness felt like the death of something they once shared. Daisy had no idea that her words hadn't just stung in that moment. They had carved out a wound that might never close. Her words hadn't just stung. They had torn open a scar Raymond had spent his entire life trying to hide. He had always been deeply self-conscious about his size, a subject he never dared bring up, not even with the friends he trusted most. As a boy, he had endured whispers, cruel jokes, and quiet snickers behind his back. In high school, a lie born from an offhand locker room conversation spread like wildfire. He could still remember the look on his teenage crush's face when she overheard it. Not shock, not pity, but indifference, as though he'd instantly become invisible to her. That expression stayed with him long after, shadowing his adult life. He had tried to bury that insecurity, but it always lurked just under the surface. His last serious relationship had ended in the most brutal way imaginable, walking in on his girlfriend with another man. When he demanded an explanation, she didn't cry, didn't apologize. She simply shrugged and delivered a sentence that shattered him. "You just don't satisfy me." From that moment on, he sealed that part of himself away, never allowing anyone close enough to touch it. Over time, he built a shell of confidence and convinced himself he had moved beyond it. And then came Daisy. With her, he felt different, not small, not lacking, not in need of proving himself. With her, he felt safe, seen, loved. He truly believed she saw the man he really was, not the insecurities he carried. Until that night, you argue so much for someone who's barely a man. No wonder you're so tiny down there. One sentence. That was all it took to rip through years of carefully built defenses. It dragged him back to those high school hallways filled with laughter at his expense, to the sting of betrayal, to the weight of shame. Only this time, the words weren't from strangers or an unfaithful ex. They came from Daisy, the one person he believed never would. For the first time in their marriage, he doubted whether he could ever look at her the same way. Daisy tried to believe that with time, things would smooth over, but the longer she waited, the more he slipped away from her. One evening, determined to bridge the distance, she stepped into the guest room where he'd been staying, expecting him to be scrolling on his phone. The bed was empty. The sound of running water came from the bathroom, and his phone lay on the bed, screen still lit. She almost turned away. She had never been the type to snoop, but then her eyes caught on an email notification. Subject: regarding divorce proceedings. Her breath caught. Divorce. No, it had to be a misunderstanding. But deep down, she knew it wasn't. This wasn't just about one cutting remark. This was bigger. Raymond wasn't simply angry. He was preparing to leave her. When he stepped out of the bathroom, she was waiting, heart pounding. "Are you really thinking about divorcing me over one argument?" she whispered. For the first time in weeks, his eyes met hers. They didn't hold anger or even sadness, just emptiness. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet, steady. "You think this is just about that night?" And in that moment, she understood. It wasn't only the insult. It was every unresolved fight, every unspoken resentment, every fracture they had ignored for too long. That night hadn't caused a collapse. It had simply been the final blow to an already crumbling foundation. Desperate, Daisy threw herself into repairing what she had broken. She apologized again and again, not just in words, but in action. She cooked the meals he loved, left him notes, tried to spark conversations about anything. His day, the weather, their shared memories. But his replies stayed the same, short, empty, and detached. That was what frightened her most. The hollow way he seemed to have already answered the question she couldn't bear to ask. Did he even want to stay? His silence said it all. Daisy had always believed regret could be undone if you tried hard enough, that any mistake could be fixed with enough effort. But this was different. Some wounds couldn't be erased. Then one evening, as she passed the guest room, she froze. Raymond was packing. A suitcase lay open on the bed, his clothes folded neatly inside. Panic surged. Before she could think, she stepped into the room, voice trembling. "Are you really leaving?" He let out a slow breath, hands gripping the edge of the suitcase. He didn't answer at once. When he finally turned toward her, his voice was steady, but weighted with truth. "I don't know if I can get past this." The words hit her harder than any outburst could. She had braced for anger, for shouting, for him to unleash weeks of pent-up resentment. But this quiet uncertainty was far worse. Her vision blurred with tears. Pride no longer mattered. "I love you," she choked out. "I messed up. I wish I could take it back. But I can't. Just tell me what to do." For the first time in weeks, something flickered across his face. Hesitation, conflict,